What up, data nerds? I'm Luke, and welcome to my channel where I make data visualization easy. In this video today, we're going to be focusing on how to get up and running with VS Code using Python. So we're going to be focusing on many of the high topic areas, not getting into the deep details with VS Code, but actually looking at things that you'll be using on a daily basis if you're running Python inside of VS Code. We're going to be covering three main points today. So the first thing is going to be what you need to know to get up and running and get started. So it's going to be going in, creating a project, creating a new Python notebook, enabling linting, enabling formatting, and get everything set up for you to go and code. Second thing, we're going to be looking at the sidebar and the bottom ribbon and some of the other features that Python and VS Code have within it that you should be taking advantage of. And then the third thing, sort of a bonus, we're going to be looking at Jupyter Notebooks and how to run Jupyter Notebooks inside of VS Code. One quick note, this video assumes that you have VS Code installed on your computer and then you also have Python installed on your computer. I have a link up above that I'll include on how to install VS Code, and also I'll include a link as far as how to install Python onto your computer. So with that, let's jump right in. So here I am on a Mac machine with the VS Code open. One thing to note, we'll be covering the difference between Windows and Mac. Specifically, the only main differences are the shortcuts. For shortcuts, if I'm calling them out, they probably are something that I would commit to memory because they're going to make your work life so much more easier whenever you're going to actually go through and make these projects. So let's say we want to start a new project. We'd come into VS Code, we'd click up at the top of this Explorer right here. And then from there, we would want to open the folder where we're going to be having our project. And I'll click Open Folder. And from here, I could select a project that I had already. So I have projects that I keep organized like this. But we'll go ahead and just start a new folder. And we'll call this Project Example. Here we are with Project Example open. And if we come and actually hover over Project Example, we can see we have a few different options. The two main that I'm going to call out, so we can create a file if we want. So we'll be creating a hello world.py file. And you can see that as I'm typing, VS Code picked up the Python and what type of file it is. No Python interpreter is selected. I'll get to that in a second. And then you can also do something like add a folder. So if I had some sort of subdirectory, I could create a folder for that and put files inside of it. So now, acknowledging this warning, it's saying, hey, no Python interpreter is selected. We need to select a Python interpreter so we can do things like linting and debugging. It also has this down here. So you could select either one of these two. I'm just going to select down at the bottom left. Now, if I select it, it's going to go through and it's going to tell me, okay, I have Python 2.7 installed on my computer, and I have some other versions of Python installed on my computer that I have virtual environments already set up for within Anaconda. Because this is a new project, I highly encourage anytime you're starting a new project to create a new virtual environment. And if you're unsure on how to do that, I have a video that I'll include a link at the top of the screen, but I'm gonna go ahead and create a virtual environment for this project real quick. I'll escape out of here and escape out of this as well. And then I want to launch the terminal. So I can come up here to terminal and select new terminal, or I can just commit to memory control tilde, and it will pop open a terminal. And for this, we'll be using Anaconda, like I said. So I'll create a new environment. So the new environment is created, and as it says, hey, we can activate it. So I can come here, and if I wanted to, I can Conda activate the project virtual environment that I just created. And it will say right here in the terminal, hey, it's activated, but we still need to, within VS Code, select this Python interpreter. And if I come into here and try to look for it, you're not going to find it because we need to actually reload VS Code. And this is just specific to Anaconda itself. But if we wanted to, another shortcut that you should have to memory is pressing Command-Shift-P, and that's specific to Mac. On a Windows, it would be Control-Shift-P, and this is going to open the command palette. And so anytime you need anything, you want to be opening up the command palette, and you can easily search for a lot of different features within VS Code. So for this, I want to basically restart or reload VS Code. So I'll come in and type reload window, and this is what I want. And if I'm not going to memorize this one, but it's Command R for that. And then so I reloaded the window, and it says, prompts me again, hey, we need to select a Python interpreter. So I'll come down here, say select Python interpreter, and now whenever I scroll through, I'll find that the project virtual environment is there. So I'll select this. And so now it is selected. I'll close out of this pop-up right here. And then remember, we want our terminal to also be inside of that virtual environment. So let's just go ahead and trash can this and then press Control-tilde. And whenever we relaunch the terminal, it will relaunch within the project virtual environment, which is really neat. So anytime we relaunch this folder or directory, it's going to relaunch into the virtual environment for the terminal. So I'm gonna go ahead and clear the terminal real quick. So now we're almost there to having the VS Code set up. We still need to enable a few more features. So let's just enter some code in here. So we'll do a simple print hello world example. And so I'll just put it in here, and we can see I can select run from up at this GUI icon, or I can come up to the top and click run without debugging or start debugging. So I'll run without debugging, and it runs it within our terminal. And as we can see, it prints out the hello world. So I'll go ahead and clear. Okay, so the one thing is, if we need to enable linting, and we need to understand what linting is first if you don't. So say we had Python 2 syntax in here on accident. So this is not an acceptable way to write a print statement in Python, Python 3 version. But I'm not getting any prompt that this is incorrect, and there's nothing like we should have something like a spell check or some sort of way to show us as the user that we've written this code incorrectly. Because if I went to run this, it would give us an error. But let's enable linting to help us as a user to see this easier. So from here, I will Command-Shift-P to open the palette, and then I'll type in linting. And we want to enable linting, and we want to turn it on, okay? So linting is enabled, but you can see that it's still not picking up that there's an error with this code. And that's because we don't have a linter installed. Sometimes whenever you launch VS Code, it will prompt you to install a linter such as Pylint. I would encourage you just do it then whenever it does prompt you to do it. But in this case, it didn't prompt us to do it, so we're gonna have to actually install it. So you can either use pip, I'll be using conda for this, and I will conda install Pylint. So we have enabled linting, and then we've installed Pylint into our virtual environment, but we now need to reset the window to make sure that it's working properly. So again, we'll go to Command-Shift-P, and we'll reload the window. And then now we're getting this squiggly lines right here, and it's telling us, hey, you're missing parentheses in a call to print. Did you mean print hello world? And so that's pretty neat. And also you can see it down at the bottom here in the bottom ribbon. They have the errors appearing as well. So you can see the problems and errors as you go. And the last thing to note is, I think it's a pretty neat feature right here, but this, you can't really see it because we don't have a lot of code. But it will actually highlight on your script where you have errors. So if I had a lot of different code, it will call out the red on where the errors or conditions are that we want to look at. So let's go ahead and fix this then and save it. The last thing I want to call out is this folder that was now created, this .vscode. Dot in front means that it's going to be hidden if you were to look in the directory. But hey, why was this created? And it was created because it updated our settings. And remember, we went in and enabled linting. We put it to true. And so this just creates a settings file within VS Code. So don't worry about this too much. Just know that it's going to be there. And if you wanted to add additional settings, this will get updated. I wouldn't delete it. The next thing to look into is the formatting. And for Python itself, you go to python.org, we can look at, they have a PEP manual, so Python enhancement proposals, and it has different guidelines for how you should be using Python. And the one thing that you'll hear people talk about a lot is PEP 8, and that's the style guide for Python code. And there's a specific amount of white space you should be using in certain expressions, how you should be using string quotes, naming conventions that you should be using. So there's a lot of information on how you actually should be formatting your code. We can enable formatting within VS Code, so that way it adheres to this guidelines, and if it's ever not adhering to this, it will auto-correct it. To understand formatting better, let's look at a simple if statement because it requires certain formatting, and we'll look at this and see how this can help us out. So coming down, I'm going to create a simple if statement. I'll type in if, and another great feature of VS Code is it provides code snippets, and you can see it automatically fills in the formatting and what it expects the structure of a if statement to be. So I'm gonna go ahead and fill this out for a if statement real quick. Okay, so we have our simple example here. I'll go ahead and press Command S. And then just to show it, it's, hey, we assigned x equal to 0. If it's less, in this if statement, we said, hey, if x is less than 1, we expect it to print x is less than 1, and else it's going to print x is greater than 1. So I'll run this, and as expected, hey, x is less than 1. So let's go ahead and clear this. So per the PEP manual, if I bring this back over here, for code layout, they expect the indentation is to use 4 spaces per indentation level. And using VS Code's code snippet, it automatically did these 4. But let's say you're just going through and doing tab. And let's say you also do some things like you don't have spaces in between the equal sign here. It's correct syntax actually put spaces in between here to make it more readable as well. But if I ran it, it would still run properly. But this is not necessarily best practice for the formatting that it's in currently. So let's enable formatting. We can come and press Command-Shift-P or Control-Shift-P, and then we'll do format document. So we'll come here and select Format Document. And it says, hey, Formatter AutoPEP 8 is not installed. Do you want to install? Yes, and you can also use Black or YPF. I recommend just using AutoPEP 8. And we want to install, in our case, we're using Conda, so we'll install using Conda. And it'll go ahead and type in the command for us, install the packages. And I'll go ahead and clear this. So now if I wanted to format this file, I'd go back to the command palette and do format document. And you could memorize this shortcut as well. I'm going to show you an easier method, but I could select format document. And as you can see, hey, it removed the spaces. So just to show the example of messing this code all up. And so now there's extraneous spaces in between here. We'll put a space here, and we'll format it. Go to format document, and it puts it back to how it needs to be formatted properly. But that's a little bit of work. I recommend like linting. Linting does it whenever we save. We should also format when we save. So a quick way to do this is we will pop open the settings, and I'll put this down, and then we'll just type in format. And what I want is to format on save. So I will click this right here, and it will format on save now. And then from here, I can close out of settings. And just to show the example again, if I put some weird spaces in here and then click Command S, it will format the code correctly upon save. The last optional feature that I'm going to recommend that you do is to go in and install an extension. So I want to open up extensions. I'll pop it open right here. It's a little square looking icon. And one thing to note is we do have Python installed already. The one that I'm going to recommend that we install is Code Runner, and it's going to make running code a lot easier. And it's going to make it to where you can just use a shortcut to run your code. So I'll click install this extension. One of the key features of this is you can run the code and you can just see it in the output pane, which will show, and you're not just limited to just do it inside of the terminal itself. And that's what it's saying right here, view output in output window. And to run the code, it's really simple. We would just remember that we have a shortcut of Control-Alt-N. So let's go ahead and show this in action. So if I press Control-Alt-N, it will go ahead and run the code, and it's going to be putting it in the output pane now. And we're not doing it through the command prompt, but so it's really easy to actually troubleshoot, and you can actually see what the time it took to run your code. And it's a lot quicker, I feel, from a work perspective, to run code this way. So that covers the features that you need to know to get up and started and running. Let's move into other features within Python or other features within VS Code that you should be taking advantage of. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of this and this as well. One thing to note, I can press Command plus or Command minus to make the screen size bigger and smaller. So let's start looking at this sidebar right here. We already covered the Explore menu of how to get into the project itself. The next key thing to look at is search. And search is, like you would expect, if you type in some sort of thing, it will say, hey, print. I wanted to search for print. It would find all the different values of print within all the different files and show you it there. Now let's say we wanted to do a search and replace. If it's not appearing, you would just click this arrow right here. So let's say we don't want to use X anymore for our variable. We want to use Y. So I could take X, replace it with Y. And then from here, I'd click this button off to the side that says replace all. And it has hey, replace 4 occurrences. Yep. Replace it, and now Y is in our code instead of X. So moving on is source control, and I highly recommend if you're doing like a major project to initialize a repository using Git. And so we'll just show a quick example here on the usefulness of it. So I'll click initial repository. And don't worry too much if you're not familiar with Git and source control. That's a whole nother topic, but this is just gonna be a brief introduction. And so we can see, hey, we're on this master branch of the setting, and we have changes. So if we wanted to, we could add these changes. Right now we have 2 of the hello world.py and the settings.json. So I can go ahead and commit or add these changes itself. And from here, let's say, go back to this example where let's take Y and replace with Z and do a replace all and replace. Now, if I come over, I have my source control telling us I have these 4 different things happening, but I have this icon up here. And what I can do is I can actually compare the differences between the 2 files itself. And it'll highlight in red from the original file, green, or the original file on the left and the new file on the right, and highlight what these changes are. But gets a whole nother subject that gets really more in depth, but I just wanted to show a quick overview of this. So let's go ahead and escape out of this. I'll close it. The next thing to look at in the ribbon is the debug function itself. And in order to run and debug properly, we need to create a launch.json file. So the first thing you need to actually do is click this to create one. And we're using Python, so we'll click Python file. And this will just have the launch.json pop open. We don't really need this open for our uses. But now we get into the actual view that we would expect to see for debug. So if I open this up a little bit, So let's just add to this code slightly to show this example better. I'm going to just make this message equal to. And then here outside of the if statement itself, I'll click, we'll do the print. And for the run and debug, if we say we just ran this code itself, hey, we expect it to say, hey, z is less than 1. Let's say we want to stop at a certain portion. So let's say we just want to stop up at the top line and then step our way through the code. And that means just go line by line. And if we wanted to start running, we would want to press F5. On a Mac, you're gonna, it will be the same, Windows F5 as well. And what it's gonna do is it's gonna pop up some things. So first of all, so we're inside of the code. And we have this yellow arrow right here and it's showing, hey, you're right here on this line. And you have these few features located up at the top. We can continue to run the rest of the code. We can do a step over, step into, step out, and restart the code if we want. And then if we want to just completely stop, we can press stop itself. And so what's really neat is you can actually see things as they go along. So our local and global variables. So let's say we go to the next line. So we're at the next line, so line 2. It now notices that, hey, we have the z variable and it has z equals to 0. And if I go to the next one, and now it's doing the if statement itself, and we would expect now that the special variables message would appear next. And so yeah, it does, it pops. So now message z is less than 1 is appearing. It skips the else statement because z was less than 1, and now we're at print message, and we can go over this. And then we finish it. If we wanted to, we could also add expressions to watch. So say I wanted to watch message. And we hit this breakpoint as well. And we do F5. We step into it, message, so right now, name message is not defined, but as I go along, I can see that after we get through that, hey, now it gets updated. And this is a good way to track and understand what's going on inside of your code and maybe watch certain variables and see how they change as they go through. But let's go ahead and go all the way through and finish this out. Okay, so that's enough on debug. So closing out of the debug and closing out of the terminal, now we can remove this breakpoint. For the last portion, let's look how we can use Jupyter Notebooks inside of VS Code. So we don't need this hello world anymore, and I opened up the Explorer. And we can either create a new file, and it will automatically pick up that this is a Jupyter Notebook. Now that I have started this Python notebook, I need to use IPY kernel to be installed, so I'll click install. So it is now installed. If you can't remember the nomenclature for a Jupyter Notebook, another easy way is just open the command palette and type in Jupyter. And from here we can say, hey, create new blank Jupyter Notebook. And it will create this new notebook for us, and then we'd have to actually save it into this directory. But I'm gonna go ahead and close it. So I'm gonna go ahead and put some code inside of here. And one thing that really is great about using a Jupyter Notebook inside of VS Code is it's using IntelliSense. And so we're getting these auto suggestions already. And so I can get a lot of different suggestions that on what I should be typing. And this normally isn't available, especially if you're using Jupyter Notebooks inside of your web browser. It's not gonna be available. So for this, I'm just going to be using Pandas library. Don't worry if you don't understand too much about this. This is just to show the example of using Jupyter Notebook to more of a maximum extent. And this is just one cell right here. So for this one, I want to just note that, hey, we imported pandas. And if I wanted to execute it, I'd press Control Enter. Or if I wanted to execute it, I could also click this run cell right here. And it's saying, hey, pandas is not installed. So you're getting this troubleshooting right here inside of the Jupyter Notebook itself. I need to install pandas. So I'll just come in, Control tilde, conda install pandas. So pandas install, I'll close out of the terminal, and then I'll run this again by pressing Control Enter, and no longer getting a warning message. And right here it has that the green asterisk, so it was slowly loading, and get this statement of pandas is imported. Now I'm going to just go ahead and insert some other code below this. And if I wanted to even add another cell, I would click that plus icon right here. And then if I wanted to, so I have all these different cells, I could go through line by line and clicking this run button, or I can come up here to the top and just click this run all. And what it will do is it will go through and it will run all. And obviously I have an error right here. So we talked about already, you can run all cells. You can have a cell selected in this case. So we have this one selected. If I want to run this one again above it, I would just click this button right here to run the cell above it. If I was selected on this cell, I could run the cell below it. And then if I wanted to, I could restart the Python kernel or interrupt the kernel if it's taking, say you accidentally get into a loop that you need to stop. This would be a great little feature to use right here. If I wanted to, I could clear all the output and just get the code again, but I want the output, so I'll run all these cells again. A great feature that I really like is this show variables active in the Jupyter kernel, and it will actually show you all the different variables that you have. So in our case, I have a D for a dictionary, a DF for the data frame, and you don't have to use Python code to actually look at this. You can just press this right here to explore your different variables. And when I'm done with this, I can just close out of it and it will close down the server. Previously, you'd have to use your terminal to launch a Jupyter Notebook, and then you'd have to remember that you had a server running and shut down the server. So there's a lot of benefits, and the process is very much streamlined when you're using VS Code. Bam, so there you have it. That's how you get up and running with VS Code for Python. As a quick recap, we covered three main things. So the first thing was getting started with a project, how to set up things such as formatting and linting, and installing extensions such as Code Runner. The second thing, we moved into additional features, so understanding how to use Git control, the debugger, and all the features that are encompassed with that. And then finally, we moved into using Jupyter Notebooks within VS Code, which is personally my favorite way to run Python code quickly and experiment with different things. As a quick shout out, this video is part of a series where we go through to understand the basics to get up and running with Python on your computer. We don't really focus on coding itself, but we more focus on the tools necessary to be installed on your computer to run Python. For the next portion of the series, I'm going to be shifting to just basic Python and understanding the language itself and what's inherent to the core Python language. So be sure to check that out. So if either of those series seems interesting, consider subscribing. Also, it'd be awesome if you smash that like button and comment down below on your favorite features in VS Code and what you'd like to learn in Python. Hope to see you again.